Dr. Joy, thank you so much for being with us today as we talk about truth, healing, and transformation.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. You've been quoted to say, "May the revolution be healing." I'd love for you to say a little bit more about that and how you came to this work of healing, and then what's your truth?
As we think about this idea of revolution, and which brings up so much about power and resistance and pushback, and all of that has to be present, particularly in this particular moment. But I also am asking the question, may it also be healing? May it also include our most, the largest container for our health, our well-being, our biggest opportunity for being connected with each other. And so may it also include all of that. And so in terms of what my truth is in this moment is that I really am at a place of getting to show up in practice for both holding heartbreak and joy. How do I show up in both things? We are in a moment of such duality as we look at no charges that are coming in terms of Breonna, nothing that has come. What do we do to hold that kind of heartbreak? And so I'm sitting with how do we hold both things? And yet, in order to get up, we have to also reach for our humanity and reach for our joy. So that's where I'm at.
One of the things I think about when I think about the phrase, "May the revolution be healing," is that all of our wellness is intertwined. Our liberation is dependent upon the liberation of others, and that this revolution is for all of us. And so that really speaks to me and my truth. Right now, for the Black community, it may seem like there's no refuge from racism or injustice. How do you encourage people you work with that the healing and hope that they have is not only valid but necessary to survive? And then what does healing look like in this moment?
Yeah. There's so much, right? So it causes me first to take a moment of pause. And it really encourages me to not only just look at this present moment, but to really reach back, and I have to pull on the spirit of my ancestors, of those who have come before me, because I need it, like we need those spirits, and that I am reminded that we can shift these like neural pathways of the way in which trauma has been passed down. We do not have to just sort of accept that the trauma that has been passed down, or the trauma that we are experiencing now, has to be our reality. That we can actually rewrite these things, and that we have these concepts that are available to us to be able to shift that. And when we do them in community, right? And not only just doing these practices in an individual way, but when we share them, we do them in community, how it can actually be multiplied. So I come spreading the good news to say that no, we have this, we can do this, and we're going to hold both the heartbreak, we're going to pause, and we're going to hold the heartbreak and joy, and we're going to keep reaching for each other's humanity.
I love that. That's very powerful. Yeah. Thank you. I'd love for you to share with us how we can create spaces of healing when we know that the world is so damaged, so hurt and broken at this point in time.
I would say that we start by creating those spaces within ourselves, right? This idea of radical self-care, and when we talk, folks think like, why start with radical self-care? But I think about my sister ancestor's quote, Audre Lorde, who says that caring for myself is not self-indulgent. It is self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare. It says self-care is an act of political warfare. Like, we have to just pause and like think about that for a minute, right? How could self-care be an act of political warfare? Well, because the system, I would argue, doesn't want us well. If we're not well, we will turn on ourselves and turn on each other, right? When we're not well. And so there's this idea that if we practice radical self-care as resistance, we are actually building a space of healing within ourselves. So then when we enter into space, automatically that space becomes, we usher in a healing presence. We're bringing it with us, yes? And so then we're able to come into spaces, and it shifts the atmosphere because we're coming into those spaces already with this healing presence. So that's number one. I use this process that I created that's called the Orange Method, and it has 4 parts. Meditation, which is about getting grounded. Mindfulness, which is about getting present. Emotional liberation, which is about getting free, and conscious movement, which is about getting unstuck. And so what I encourage, even though like it's a process that I put together that's called the Orange Method, but it's not, the practices are not mine. They belong to all of us. They belong to our ancestors. Like, I didn't create meditation. It's been around for thousands of years. What I do is remind us that these practices are available to us.
Thank you. I know that the Women's Foundation was able to invest in your work to help women during this time of twin pandemics here in the Twin Cities. And that is so important for you to be investing in the Black women who are investing in the movement and helping them heal their communities. So thank you for that.
Yes, no, thank you.
That's tremendous.
Absolutely.
So as you've said, the transformation has both a personal component and a societal component. How and where do they intersect? How does that look?
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of how I want us to begin to think about this. If I were to go outside and my, say for instance, my car had a flat tire. I hope it doesn't, but let's just say it did. Maybe I'm thinking, oh, a couple of tires might cost me like $300 or something. But I was like, okay, I know how much money I have in my account, so I can get that taken care of. Well, what we're not as tuned into is how much we have in our energy bank, right? Where the intersection is looking at how am I paying attention to taking care of making sure that I'm making some deposits, right? Making some deposits into that, into my energy bank so that I can make a contribution, right? We are in the middle of so much, just a lot of heartbreak and tragedy and lots of uncertainty. And so how are we gonna stay ready for that? And then we're in that intersection.
Dr. Joy, do you have any takeaways for our audience on how we can each be part of truth, healing, and transformation?
Wow. Yes, definitely. I mean, I think I want people to definitely be a part of the larger movement, but if you don't get anything else, I want you to first start with yourself, right? So I want to make sure that people are taking exquisite care of themselves. So I want to start there. You know, and I do this work, I look at myself and say, you know, what are those places where I may be running my own oppressor patterns? I am very, very, very comfortable and practiced at organizing around the places where I am target. As a Black woman who lots of racism, lots of anti-Blackness comes in my direction. But if the revolution is going to be healing, I have to look at my own privilege. How am I going to show up? And I would encourage folks that if you really want to be a part of the revolution, you're going to have to look at that. It doesn't mean that what we're doing isn't important. It is important, but it's not the same. And what does that mean? How do we show up? How do we feel that pain that someone who is not, we're not suffering in the same way. So how do we really find out what it is that folks need and continue to show up?
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that perspective. It really causes me to think about my own truth and really own that. And like you say, recognize the privilege that I've had. And you know, yes, I grew up in a low-income community, raised by a single mom, and there were definitely challenges in that. And at the same time, I had the privilege of a mom who told me that whatever it is I wanted to do, I could achieve. That is a huge privilege that so many children in today's society do not hear. And so when I'm confronted with racism, I hear that voice of my mother, I hear that voice of my ancestors saying that you are a child of God and you have potential and you have the right to live a fulfilled life as you define it. And owning that truth, I think, for each of us is really important. And I feel that the Women's Foundation can create the conditions in society so that all women and girls can have that privilege of understanding that they can fulfill their potential as human beings. So thank you. Really appreciate that. So as we wrap up our conversation, I'd love for you to share what your hope is for women and girls in our society.
You know, it brings me to, I think, a story of another young girl in my neighborhood. It was a pretty hot day, and there were these young girls who had come over, and I was grabbing some popsicles. And I was just asking them about, you know, what they like to do. And so Jazzy said to me, I like, you know, my favorite thing is ballet. I want to be a ballerina. I like ballet. I was like, oh. And I was trying to remember Mitzi Copeland's name, and it would not come to me in that moment. And I was like, do you know the black ballerina? And she was like, who? And I was like, do you know the, and I could not remember Mitzi Copeland's name. And so anyway, I went in the house to go get these popsicles. I come back out, and a big fight had broken out. And these are like kind of big kids, like 16, 17. I mean, it's huge. Like the police are called, it's a whole thing. The fight breaks up. Jazzy breaks into the middle, like the fight is almost over. Jazzy breaks into the middle of the fight, and she's like, she brings her cell phone and she holds it up to me and she says, is this her? Mitzi Copeland? Is this her? And I said, I mean, it's mass confusion going on. And I'm like, yes. She was like, wow, that's awesome. Yes, I want to be her. And so my wish for women and girls is to have the kind of conviction like Jazzy. Like, no matter like what is actually going on, to have this kind of hope and to have this kind of conviction. I was like, Jazzy, there's a big fight. She was like, I see them, and somebody's like calling her name in the middle. She was like, I have to show Dr. Joy this picture. I have to show her Mitzi Copeland. This is who I'm going to be, right? And so I feel like that is the hope, that is what I want for women and girls, to say like, may the revolution be healing, right? Like that no matter what is actually happening, that we have the kind of vision, the kind of radical reimagining that like, no, I am clear. I have my eye on the possibility of what can be, and even though all of this confusion is going on, I'm clear. I'm going to be Mitzi Copeland. That is what I want for folks.
I love that spirit of Jazzy being yes. radically hopeful,
yes.
Very focused, and just thinking about the possibilities yes. for herself in yes. the midst of chaos. So
finding calm in
chaos. We know what that's all about. Yes. So thank you. And my hope is that we can continue to expand the work that you do so that our community can get stronger, us as individuals and us as a community. Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you.